2022 NASCAR champions have been crowned. Let's break down all the races and talk about the reception of Phoenix as a whole. This episode of Above the Yellow Line is presented by Shaq Gear. Hey race fans, it's Taylor and welcome back to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk all about the NASCAR Cup Series. We're going to also be talking about trucks and Xfinity today. I've been making these videos since January, so it's wild that it's November. It still doesn't feel like November outside from where I'm from. We're just going to pretend that's non-existent. It is the end of the NASCAR season. I cannot believe it. Let's get into the final races that we had over the weekend, starting off with the Truck Series. If you didn't watch all the racing this weekend, we're going to notice a trend when we're talking about each individual series. For the Camping World Truck Series, Zane Smith won the pole, won the race, and is your 2022 Camping World Truck Series champion. Before we dive into the on-track action for Camping World, this is their last time sponsoring NASCAR as a title sponsor for the series. So thank you to Marcus Lemonis and everybody at Camping World for really showing us what it should be like to be a title sponsor in a sport. They fielded, I think, or helped field like 10 cars or something at some point during a race. I think half the field was Camping World during one race, I think in 2020. That just shows their dedication to this sport. Of course, when Marcus Lemonis made the announcement, he said, we're leaving the sport in good hands. We're also wanting to make sure that we take care of our people too at Camping World. Next season in 2023, Camping World Truck Series is no more. It is going to be the Craftsman Truck Series. We are throwing it back going into the future. I think it's kind of fitting that the 75th year of NASCAR, we're going to be throwing it back, but also having a new title sponsor. So again, thank you to everyone at Camping World for doing the sport justice, but going to be missed for sure. During this race, things got pretty interesting. There was a bad pit stop by Zane Smith in Stage 3, or going into Stage 3, and I thought that Zane had lost it, but he was able to battle his way back to the lead on the restart. And then there was a caution, and then with a few to go, the Championship 4 were racing under a blanket 1, 2, 3, 4. Unfortunately, on this restart, Ty Majeski tried to make something happen, tried to get to the lead. It spun him out, and his championship hopes were over. Then we went into NASCAR overtime, and 3 of the Championship 4, Ben Rhodes, Ty Majeski, and Chandler Smith, raced it for a championship. Ben Rhodes was so close to going back-to-back, wasn't able to make it happen. Zane Smith clearly had the best car all weekend and was able to win the race. So congrats to that team. Front Row Motorsports is finally a championship team, so very exciting for them. I also gotta say too, those final few laps of that overtime, I think all of us back at home were expecting chaos, or we were at least expecting someone to wreck each other out for a championship, which is not really what we wanted to see in any of the races this weekend, and luckily we did not. But the 3 raced each other really clean to the end, so kudos to those guys. I know we give the Truck Series a lot of crap sometimes for not racing clean or racing just without thinking, and they were thinking this time. They raced each other very respectfully, so I definitely appreciated that between the 3. Now let's move on to the Xfinity Series. Another trend here. Ty Gibbs won the pole going into this weekend. He won the race and he won the championship. I was kind of shocked. Junior Motorsports did not seem to have it together for the championship race. I'm not sure if there was a bunch of pressure involved. I mean, they had 3 chances to get a championship and they let it slip. There were bad pit stops. The speed just wasn't there. Justin Allgaier might have been having some issues with his car. Noah Gragson got really close in the final few laps to catching Ty Gibbs, but he just was not close enough. He did say before the race that, hey, if I have to wreck him to get a championship, I will, based on what happened at Martinsville and the drama that unfolded there. But Noah Gragson, a class act, went up to the crew members of the number 45 car and up to Ty Gibbs himself, shook their hands and congratulated them on a championship. So very excited to see what he will do next year. And obviously at this point, we are pretty sure that Ty Gibbs is moving to the number 18. We pretty much figured this out in like July, August, but they're going to probably be making an announcement within the next few weeks that will be happening. So I'm excited to see Noah Gragson and Ty Gibbs continue this rivalry going into 2023 in the Cup Series. With the Xfinity race as well, I think this was the best of the weekend. I feel like this was the most competitive that we saw the championship for together during most of the race. Obviously, there were some bad pit stops, like I said, for Junior Motorsports, where they got mired back in the field, but with some timely cautions, and even just with Rosby, they were able to get back into the mix with each other. But Ty Gibbs ultimately was your 2022 Xfinity Series champion. Now we got to talk about some unfortunate news here. Ty Gibbs was supposed to be racing in the Cup Series race on Sunday. It was announced a few hours before the race by 2311 Racing that Ty Gibbs would not be in the car due to a family emergency. They started testing out drivers to be in that seat from all different manufacturers. We'll talk about how Daniel Hemrick ended up doing in that 23 car. Then right before the invocation, it was announced that Coy Gibbs, the father to Ty Gibbs and the son of Joe Gibbs, had passed away that day. My thoughts and prayers go out to the Gibbs family, to Joe Gibbs Racing, the whole organization, anyone who was affected or touched by Coy Gibbs during this time. I wish them all well and sending them my thoughts and prayers. So that was Truck and Xfinity. Now let's go into the Cup Series results. We also got to bring in our Shaq Gear MVP of the week, the final one of the season, if you can believe it or not. Going into the championship four, there was no clear favorite in my eyes. Everybody had really solid stats going into the championship race, whether it be made in the regular season or whether it be made during the playoffs. For example, in my opinion, Christopher Bell really made his season known in the playoffs. Joey Logano, he was really solid throughout the entire season, mostly in the playoffs. Chase Elliott, really solid in the regular season. Same with Ross Chastain. So it created a really interesting mix. It was really a matter of who was able to get the pole and win the race, and that was Joey Logano, the 22-22 Dom Joseph ATYL crew member, was able to predict this, I think last November, that Joey Logano was going to win the championship. So Joey Logano, 22-22, your Shaq Gear MVP, as well as he completely dominated this race, winning the championship. I thought it was really funny before the race. He said in an interview, like, I told my son that I won the pole. I told him that I was going to win the race, win the championship. He's like, I can't go back to my son and be a liar. So, of course, he was the only option to win on Sunday. This is also the fourth win for him, and also really exciting, too. He started the season with a win at the Coliseum, ended the season with a win. So, kind of bookending the season. I thought that was pretty neat. Also for Team Penske as well, Ryan Blaney finished in the second position. We will go down our top 10 list. Austin Cindric is the Rookie of the Year, which is also exciting. And this is also the first time in Penske history they won the IndyCar Championship the same year they won the NASCAR Cup Series Championship. So that was also pretty cool. So a very good weekend for Penske as a whole, I would say. Talked about Blaney in the second position, and bridesmaid at the end of the season, was not able to get it done. This season will end 2022 winless. 2023 could not come soon enough for Ryan Blaney. He finished the race and he was really upset. He was asked if he intentionally did not pass Joey Logano for the win, and his clear and frustrated answer was, couldn't pass in dirty air. We could not get to that point to be able to pass. So frustrating conclusion for Ryan Blaney. He just needs a break, reset, go into 2023, guns blazing. I'm not going to make my championship predictions for next year yet. I would hope that Ryan Blaney is a championship contender, could be a future champion in our sport. I think he can. This just was not the year for him to do it, unfortunately. Then finishing in the third position and second in points for the season is Ross Chastain. There is an instance that we have to talk about as it involved another playoff contender. We all expected Ross Chastain to race pretty aggressively going into this championship race. That is exactly what we saw. However, I do not feel it was intentional, and I feel like it was a justified move. I'm talking about on a restart between him and Chase Elliott. Nobody gave an inch. Both went to get position into turn one to the dogleg at the same time. Elliott, to me, came across the nose of Chastain a bit. He initiated the contact, and Chastain did not lift and spun Chase out. And for me, Chastain did not have to lift in this instant. I know if you're a Chase Elliott fan, maybe you disagree with me, or maybe you disagree with me in general, that is totally fine. But if you're going for a championship and you do a move like that, and I feel like they got checked up a little bit in the process, nowhere to go, that kind of stuff is going to happen, and I don't feel like anything was wrong with what Chastain did. With this, Elliott went on the DVP clock, he got the car fixed, was able to go out actually a lap down, then that quickly became 2 laps down, then 3 laps down. He ended up finishing this race 2 laps down in the 28th position. At that point, his championship hopes were done. He'll have to go for a championship next year. And quite honestly, going into the championship race, I knew it probably was not going to be his year. As you remember, I talked about a trend with this 9 team. The beginning of each playoff round, they have not executed. This is technically the beginning of a playoff round, the championship race. So did not execute. You have to be able to hold it together in the regular season going into the playoffs. Granted, he had a win in the playoffs, but just was not able to keep it together for that 9 team. So better luck next year, but I do think Chastain was not necessarily justified in the move that he did, but he did nothing wrong. Then in the 4th position, we had Chase Briscoe finishing out the season strong with a 4th place finish. Same can be said for Kevin Harvick in the 5th position. William Byron 6th. Kyle Busch 7th, the last race with Joe Gibbs Racing and the last race with M&M's. 8th place, Denny Hamlin. 9th, Kyle Larson. 10th, Christopher Bell finishing 3rd in the point standings. Christopher Bell had a really bad last pit stop. That's because one of his crew members actually got his finger stuck in between the lug nut and the spindle, I believe, which sounds incredibly painful. He had ice on his finger. Hopefully he's doing okay today. Just was not in the cards for Christopher Bell. He did have a fast car, just there was never a chance where he was able to get it into clean air so we could really see what he could do. So Christopher Bell finishing in that position and also finishing 3rd in points. And looking at those that finished outside the top 10, Cindric in the 11th position got a mention, and already mentioned he is Rookie of the Year. In the 17th position, Hemrick filling in for Ty Gibbs in the number 23, finished in the 17th position. I'm looking at somebody that did not finish this race. Brad Keselowski DNF'd in the 35th position. He actually had a fire in his car. We talked about how the rubber buildup in these sports has been pretty bad. It's something that NASCAR is going to have to look up in the off season. That same thing happened to Brad, was able to exit his car safely, thank goodness. But something that they're going to have to look at during the off season. Not a good season for Brad at all, starting his year at 23XI Racing as an owner and a driver. So hopefully next year they're able to pick it back up. I want to do an episode where I go over my preseason predictions, like with you, like I'm watching the video and we're going through it together and see how wrong I am, because I think I predicted that Brad would have 2 or 3 wins. I was way off. So Brad Keselowski unfortunately did not finish this race, ended his season on a very low note, got to go into next year guns a-blazing. Now let's go into the points, how everything shook out at the end of the season. If you know the ATYL point standings, Dom Joseph and I were tied going into this championship race, and it was really a matter of who had the guy that would finish better than the other. That would mean they were your champion. Luckily, that was me today. He picked Martin Truex Jr., which was not a bad pick at all, but only gained 1 point today. I picked Kyle Larson, gave me 2 points, and I am the winner of the ATYL Points Championship. Last year, I lost pretty miserably, so I'm excited to have won this year. That means Dom is in 2nd place. 3rd place is Adam with 86 points, Brandon with 83 points, and Rob with 74 points. Adam is going to help me with a totally new system next year so we can have some more parity in the points system, so I'm excited about that. But yeah, I'm excited to have won something this season, so myself being the ATYL Points Championship, but that doesn't really matter. Let's go to the actual point standings for these drivers. Like I mentioned, our playoff drivers finishing 1, 2, 3, 4 in points: Logano, Chastain, Bell, and Elliott. Hamlin actually clinched 5th in points, but only by 1 point, which was actually impressive. I felt like he had that clinched after Martinsville, but that was not the case. Then we had Byron, Larson, Blaney, Briscoe, Suarez, Dillon, Cindric, Kyle Busch, Reddick, Harvick, Bowman, Truex, and Jones, top 18 in points. And if you want to look at the rest of your points, make sure to pause the screen and take a look. Some interesting things to note. I think Keselowski in 24th in points shocked me the most. But those are how your points shook out at the end of 2022. Now let's go to our race rating above or below the yellow line for our championship race. Always got to start off with our Twitter poll. Here is what you had to say. Only 9% of you said this championship race was a great race. 19% said good, 41% said okay, and 31% said bad. Kind of the same on YouTube. 13% said great, 21% said good, 46% said okay, and 20% said bad. I highly encourage you all to go to the comment section of YouTube in particular. There's a lot of good discourse happening over there about the race, what we think. I'm going to talk about that in a second when I give my thoughts and the closing thoughts on the season as a whole. But thoughts from our own Adam Lucas. He said, quote, "A Penske-dominated race and a double-crowned champion. I stated a week ago that 2 of the championship 4 were worthy of winning, and 1 of them did. Congrats to Joey Logano on getting hot at the right time of the season. As for the race, the 12 and 22 dominated with not much in action from the rest of the pack. A so-so finale gives this race a 52 out of 100, making it above the yellow line. Now for a well-needed relax, reset, and rest from a grueling 2022 season." I want to consider the season grueling. Of course, like I said, I'm going to get to it, but I want to give my thoughts on this race because I don't know if they're divisive. I know there's a lot of people that might agree with me on this. I know that there's people that definitely disagree with me on this, and that's totally okay. Phoenix just disappoints me as a championship track. It's not a bad track really at all, but for a championship race, I said this in a TikTok video that I did, but I should not be able to tell you who the championship winner is going to be on lap 1 of this race. And to be fair, Joey Logano had a car leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else. That was pretty much settled during the whole race, but I also feel like it might have been a product of the track. This whole weekend, we saw the leader pretty much get a massive lead on the rest of the field, starting in the 1st position. If you got the poll, obviously that told us a lot too, but I should not be able to sit in front of my couch, watching the TV, getting ready for a championship race on lap 1. I'm like, oh, Joey Logano's winning the championship. Why am I watching the rest? That's how I felt a little bit. Obviously, there was some excitement this weekend too. Like I said, Truck and Xfinity, those had some pretty solid racing. Xfinity, like I said, the best racing of the entire weekend. But I do not feel like the top series of the sport should have the most subpar racing of the championship weekend. Like I said, though, this is not meant to detract from Joey Logano's championship because he clearly had the best car and was deserving of the win on Sunday, deserving of the championship as a whole. Obviously, like I mentioned last episode, the most 4 deserving drivers of the season were in the championship 4. Each had a valid reason to win. I felt, at least in my opinion, that Joey Logano was the one that won and got it done during the day. So If I had it my way, which I don't think I do, and I don't think I ever will, but we would go back to Homestead for the championship race. Granted, the racing at Homestead with this Gen 7 car wasn't as good as I've seen it in the past, so maybe that's not really the option. I would love, though, to go back to Charlotte. I've heard some of you say that you'd like to go back to Atlanta for a championship race, but right now, as it is more of a restrictor plate type of race, a super speedway type of track, I do not feel like we should be having a championship race at that track. That's just my opinion, though. I've also thrown around the idea of rotating the championship race if at all possible. I know logistics-wise that might be a little interesting, but I just don't think we should be going back to Phoenix next year. I hope 2024, maybe we reconsider another option. If we're going to more positives, though, for the fans at the track, I heard the fan experience was actually pretty decent. The only negative I heard was concession prices, but let's be fair, concession prices at any sporting event kind of suck right now. But if you were at the track, I heard you had a great time. There was a lot of things to try. Drivers were able to do a lot of autograph signings and everything, so I heard a little bit of that, so that's positive. But I am talking about this from the fan experience at home, and it just wasn't the best. Just to end the season on this race for me was a little deflating, a little disappointing, but that is just my opinion, just watching this entire season and comparing it to the other races I've seen. But for the championship race, in my opinion, it should be one of the best races, and it just wasn't. So I am going to be a little harsh on this one. I'm going to give this race a rating of 42%, making it below the yellow line. And I understand the circumstances of Sunday. Maybe that was the reason why I just felt a little down on this race, but 42% to end the season, not too far off from what I gave this race in the spring. Let's go into next year. Let's make the Coliseum a banger, the Daytona 500 a banger, like they were, in my opinion, going into this season. But next year, 2023, let's look forward to it. Well, let's pump the brakes real quick before we move on to next season, or before we go to off-season content. Let's reflect on what we've seen this year. Obviously, there were some low lows with concussions, tire issues. The car, we have a lot of growing pains with that. We also saw fires and frustrations, but we also saw a lot of highs this season. In my opinion, the intermediate racing is some of the best that we've seen in years. We almost had 20 different winners this season. The amount of parity that we've seen has been astonishing. There's also been a lot of memorable moments. The wall melon or melon, whatever we're calling whatever Rosh Chastain did, that was a memorable moment. The Coca-Cola 600, that was one of the best races I have seen in my time as a fan, and I was there, so I had a lot of memories at the track this year, covering my first race at Mid-Ohio, which was incredibly exciting. That was also great racing for the truck series, seeing Parker Kligerman get that win. So there was a lot of fantastic moments this season that I feel like are drowned out a lot by the negativity. So I want to make sure to mention those pros, and there's a lot more I'm not mentioning too, but there was definitely some high highs this season as well. I will say NASCAR was very bold this season with some of the choices that they made, and they will continue to be bold going into 2023 as we look forward and we also look back, celebrating 75 years of the sport. So I'm looking forward to North Wilkesboro, the Chicago Street Course, so I'm iffy on. I'm excited to see how it plays out. But with the 2022 season, it feels bizarre that we are closing it off at this point. I was so invested in it, and now it's like, what do I do during the off season? But I want to thank you all in particular for sticking with me this season on this journey. Lots of personal growth this year, lots of growth on social media as well, meeting a lot more of you guys, getting to meet some of you at the track. But a new era was set in 2022 with the Gen 7 car. We're moving forward into that new era, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for this sport, and I'm excited to go into next season all ready to go for 2023, maybe crowning a different champion. I feel like we might have a first-time champion next year, but yeah, 2022, thank you all for everything. Thank you, NASCAR, for making this one of the most memorable seasons yet, and we will move on to 2023. So what are your thoughts on the championship weekend? What are your thoughts on the 2022 season? Let me know in the comments below, and with that, we are done with this episode, the final recap episode of Above the Yellow Line of this 2022 season, the show where we talk all about the NASCAR Cup Series. We will have a live stream this Friday night, getting all the reactions from the ATYL crew talking about the season. We'll also probably do some gaming in there. I need to plan that out. So to hear our plans for this Friday's stream and for more from us here at Above the Yellow Line and TobyChristie.com, make sure to follow our social media pages. We are all over Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. The username TobyChristieCom is where you can find all TobyChristie.com content on all social media platforms, so make sure to give us a follow there as well. Last but not least, we had two incredible partners to close out the 2022 season here at Above the Yellow Line. I gotta thank Shaq and Doordash for supporting us here at Above the Yellow Line and TobyChristie.com. You can find all of our social pages linked in the description below, but before you check those out, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this with your friends and family, and guys, thank you so much for supporting us here at Above the Yellow Line and TobyChristie.com, and until next time, I'll see ya.